Hello, everyone. I'm Rachel from Zhejiang University. So my work is also about wireless security, but it's slightly different. So in our work, we turn the Wi-Fi devices we all rely on into an adversarial motion sensor. So we are surrounded by different Wi-Fi devices at home, offices, and factories. They make our daily tasks easier, faster, and more connected. But at the same time, they are also becoming the targets of many attacks. For example, in such a single home scenario, a laptop is connected with an AP using Wi-Fi. The attacker could attack the device or the network to gather sensitive user data. Or the attacker could monitor the network traffic pattern to infer user behavior. But today, I'm going to show you a new attack that turns the Wi-Fi device that doesn't need to do any of those three things. All the attacker needs to do is to drop a small sniffer outside of the residence, and by eavesdropping on the weak Wi-Fi signals, the attacker could identify the human presence in the room. We call this a silent occupancy detection attack. It exploits a news side channel from beamforming feedback packets. So BFI is regular control frames sent from the client to AP for beamforming. But it inevitably exploits some occupancy information. And the attacker could capture these packets and identify the occupancy state of the residence. That is, whether someone is home or not. So this attack is actually quite practical because BFI packets is very ubiquitous. They exist in 86% of Wi-Fi 5 and 6 devices and are transmitted in plain text, making them easily accessible by the attackers. And the real-world consequence is kind of severe. For example, a malicious attacker could constantly monitor the occupancy state of your house. Or worse, a burglar could detect if someone is at home before planning a break-in. So what is this BFI packet? Why do the clients always transmit such a packet to the AP? It is originally intended for beamforming. So beamforming is a technique where the AP could directionally transmit signal towards the client. So to enable this, the AP needs some spatial information called steering matrix for beam direction control. The AP and the client will first go through a sounding process, and after which the client will report the spatial information steering matrix back to AP. And this reporting rate is usually at around 10 Hertz. So this is the full sounding process. I'll dig into this further. So here's the catch. This spatial information would unintentionally include human activity. So how does BFI really reveal human activity? Consider there are two signal paths in the room. When no one is at home, the BFI value could be relatively stable. Now, an occupant enters and blocks one of the signal paths. Then the value of BFI was dropped significantly. And as the occupant continues to move, they do not block the signal entirely, but create a third dynamic signal path and lead to greater signal variations in BFI. And this fluctuation makes the attacker detect the occupancy state of the house. And based on this phenomenon, we propose LeakyBeam, the silent occupancy detection attack. It has four main features. First, it's highly accurate. Based on LeakyBeam, the attacker can not only detect moving occupants, but also stationary individuals. And it's very stealthy, and it only relies on passive sniffing. The sniffer doesn't need to transmit anything. And the plain text nature of BFI makes it highly accessible by attackers, and it's a long-range attack. LeakyBeam can work at up to 20 meters. So here's the overview of LeakyBeam attack. We begin by detecting a human motion by observing the variance of amplitude. And in the figure on the right, we can see that the moving occupant could be easily detected from the variance. But this method cannot detect stationary occupant, as in that case, the amplitude is relatively stable. Therefore, in the second step, we further refine our detection by involving the phase information. And in the spectrogram, we can see that the breathing pattern of stationary occupant could be captured so that we can detect the occupants. So the main technical challenge of LeakyBeam is that there exists some phase offset in BFI value, so that it may be difficult for an attacker to directly identify the breathing pattern. So I will discuss this a bit further. The BFI is actually computed from channel state information, or CSI. So consider an AP with 2 antennas and a client device with 1 antenna. And in that case, the channel state information is a row vector with 2 complex values. Due to the unsynchronization between the AP and the client, these 2 values will have a phase offset. The BFI is actually the right singular matrix of CSI. Thus, it also inherits the phase offset. But because of the transformation is unknown, the attacker could not recover the original version of BFI phase. So what shall we do? Our solution is quite intuitive. That is to derive a new feature R that is phase offset free. So our proof is quite simple. This new established feature R could be derived as the conjugate modification of the CSI values. And because these 2 complex values have the same phase offset, the conjugated modification could effectively cancel it out. And the result is very evident. With this new feature, we could easily detect the breathing pattern of stationary occupants. So here comes our evaluation. We implement LeakyBeam using an ordinary laptop with no external antenna, and we conduct packet sniffing using Wireshark, which is quite a simple setup for attackers. We evaluate LeakyBeam upon 8 different Wi-Fi AP in 3 different environments with different layouts, because we change the layout in each environment by 3 times. So occupancy detection is essentially a 2 classification problem. So we rely on 2 metrics, the true positive rate and true negative rate. So first, if we only consider the amplitude information, the true positive rate is around 50%. That means around half of the occupants cannot be detected. But if we consider both the amplitude and phasal information, the true positive rate can increase up to around 80%, which makes LeakyBeam super effective. And besides, LeakyBeam could work with BFI packets transmitted from different victim devices, including smart speakers, cameras, tablets, and smart TV. And it performs well when these client devices are transmitting different background traffic types, and even when they are idle. And finally, LeakyBeam has an accuracy of 88% at a distance up to 20 meters. So finally, I will discuss the defense of this attack. So the vulnerability is originated from the plaintext transmission of BFI. So a straightforward solution is to encrypt the transmission. However, updating all the Wi-Fi client devices to support encryption is quite difficult and unrealistic. So in our defense, we want to stay plaintext transmission, but instead obfuscate the content of BFI so that the attacker could not infer sensitive user data. So this is the original BFI measurement process. where the AP would first transmit a long training symbol X to the client device, and the client will then measure the channel state information, compute the steering matrix, and return it back to the AP. But in our defense, we want to involve a random mapping on the transmitted training symbol X. And as a result, the returned BFI from the client will also be obfuscated, and the attacker could not infer useful user data. However, the AP could use some mathematical properties to recover the original steering matrix using a simple matrix multiplication. Therefore, there is the conclusion of the features of this defense. A clear feature is that we incur minimal impact on communication because beamforming is still effective. And also, this method also will need minimal hardware modification because on the client side, the client devices are unaffected. They just work as usual. But for the AP side, we can reuse the spatial mapping mechanism to implement this defense. So in conclusion, we propose LeakyBeam, a practical adversarial occupancy detection attack utilizing the BFI side channel, and we propose an effective defense mechanism to potential attacks. And this is all for my talk. Thank you, everyone, and I'm open to any questions.
Thank you. All right, finally, question. Please introduce yourself and ask the question.
Oh, thank you. That's a very interesting question. I also come from Zhejiang University. Yeah, I have one question. This attack relies on the BFI side channel. I want to know how does the attacker obtain the training data? And in the actual attack, how can the attacker knows the layout of the victim's home?
Thank you for this question. Yeah, actually, this is quite a good question because the environment and the layout ambiguity is actually a very important problem in sensing. So in our attack, we actually didn't rely on the training of the environment. We actually use a threshold-based solution so that we can solve this problem. So this is listed as one of the challenges in our paper. Please refer to it for further discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Next question.
Hi, thank you. I've already introduced myself, so I will just go on. I have two questions. The first one is about the capability of your attack, and the second one is about the defense. So firstly, can you detect when there is only one person present, or it's possible to detect the case when multiple persons are in the occupancy, and whether your algorithm can differentiate the identity of the person present in the home. So that's the first question. The second question is about your defense. So according to my understanding, your defense is to add a random matrix to process the feedback to the client. So statistically speaking, if you do not variate that fixed matrix, so later will it be possible for the attacker to infer about the used matrix? That's just some concern.
Thank you for the question. They are very good questions. So for the first question, the capability of our attack is to just infer whether there is someone at home. This is a two classification problem. So we cannot identify who is that in the residence because it's kind of more complex, and for the attackers, they do not have like the training data. So their capability is probably confined so that they could not launch such a complicated attack. And for the defense part, actually, the random mapping matrix we leverage in our paper is like a one-time pad. So it's constantly changing. And so that the attacker cannot infer the pattern in that encryption.
Okay, thank you, got it.
Thank you for the questions. Any other last one? Yes, last question. I'm going to end the session.
My question was also directed into the defense part. So if you impose the unitary queue, would it be possible to kind of exploit redundancies, say in its spectral domain, to infer queue from attacker perspective?
Sorry, I catch the random queue part, but yeah.
Could you exploit like spectral or spatial redundancies in the BFI domain to infer queue in order to remove it from an attacker perspective?
Yeah, so the random queue cannot be removed because it's constantly changing, and we have actually a formal approval in our paper appendix to prove that the attacker could not identify the original version of BFI.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the questions. Thank you for the talk. Let us thank the speaker one more time.